The moment you open your mouth to explain yourself, you've already lost. Think about it. When was the last time an explanation actually changed someone's mind about you? When has defending your decisions ever made someone respect you more? Never. That's when. 500 years ago, a disgraced diplomat sitting in exile understood something that most people alive today still refuse to accept. Niccolò Machiavelli wrote that rulers who explain themselves appear weak, uncertain, and vulnerable to attack. He wasn't talking about honesty. He was talking about power. And here's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to tell you. Every time you justify your choices to someone who didn't ask, you hand them a weapon. Every time you defend yourself against an accusation, you give it weight. Every time you explain your reasoning to people who've already judged you, you confirm their suspicion that maybe, just maybe, you don't trust your own decisions. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the most powerful people in history rarely explain themselves. You'll learn the psychology behind why explanations destroy your credibility instead of building it. And you'll discover the strategic alternative that commands respect without saying a word. This knowledge has been hidden in plain sight for half a millennium. Today, it becomes yours. The setup. In 1513, Machiavelli was a broken man. He had spent 14 years as Florence's chief diplomat, meeting kings, negotiating treaties, watching how power really worked behind closed doors. Then the Medici family returned, and everything he'd built collapsed overnight. He was stripped of his position, arrested, tortured, and banished to a small farm outside the city. Most men would have spent their exile in bitterness. Machiavelli did something different. Every evening, he would change out of his muddy farm clothes and put on his formal palace robes. Then he would enter his study and, as he described it, take his place in the courts of the past. He would read the great historians and speak with them in his mind, asking why they did what they did. The result was The Prince, a book so dangerous that the Catholic Church banned it for centuries. A book that was never meant for ordinary people. It was written as a private letter to a ruler, revealing truths about human nature that most people still refuse to accept. One of those truths cuts directly against everything you've been taught. You've been told that communication is key, that if people misunderstand you, you should clarify, that if they question your motives, you should explain, that if they doubt your competence, you should prove them wrong with words. Machiavelli observed the opposite. He watched countless leaders, both ancient and modern, and noticed a pattern that never failed. The ones who explained themselves were eventually destroyed. The ones who remained silent and acted were remembered as great. He understood something most people miss entirely. Explanations are not neutral. They are not free. Every explanation you give costs you something. And when you're dealing with people who don't have your best interests at heart, that cost can be devastating. Here's what Machiavelli actually wrote. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. That line contains more strategic wisdom than entire shelves of self-help books. It tells you that perception is the battlefield. Not truth, not fairness, not your intentions. What people see and believe about you determines how they treat you, how much power they grant you, how much respect they offer. And explanations? Explanations are attempts to control perception through words, but words are weak compared to actions. Words can be twisted, doubted, and dismissed. Actions cannot be unseen. Today we break down exactly why Machiavelli believed that explaining yourself is a form of submission, and more importantly, what to do instead. I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. I don't explain, I demonstrate. Principle 1. Explanations are confessions of doubt. The first reason Machiavelli warned against explaining yourself is psychological, and it cuts deep. When you explain a decision you've made, you send a hidden signal to everyone watching. That signal says, I'm not sure this was the right choice. That signal says, I need your approval to feel confident. That signal says, your opinion of me matters more than my own. Think about the most powerful person you've ever encountered. Not powerful in title, but powerful in presence. The person who walked into a room and immediately commanded attention. Did that person spend their time justifying their existence to others? No, of course not. Powerful people operate from an internal certainty that doesn't require external validation. They make decisions, execute them, and move on. If those decisions are questioned, they don't scramble to defend themselves. They simply continue executing. Machiavelli observed this in every successful ruler he studied. He noted that a prince must never allow his decisions to seem uncertain. The moment subjects sense doubt, they begin to test boundaries. The moment rivals smell weakness, they begin to plot. In modern terms, this translates perfectly. When you explain yourself to a critic, you're admitting that their criticism has weight. When you justify yourself to a doubter, you're confirming that doubt might be reasonable. When you defend yourself to an accuser, you're suggesting that the accusation might be true. Here's a principle that will save you years of wasted energy. The people who truly support you don't need explanations, and the people who don't support you won't believe your explanations anyway. Let me say that again, because it's important. The people who truly support you don't need explanations. They trust you. They've seen your character over time. They give you the benefit of the doubt because you've earned it. And the people who don't support you? They've already made up their minds. Your explanation won't change their opinion. It will only give them ammunition to continue attacking. So who exactly are you explaining to? And why? Most people explain themselves because they're uncomfortable with the tension of being misunderstood. They want the discomfort to go away. But that relief comes at a price. The price is power. Every explanation reduces your authority. Every justification diminishes your standing. Every defense you mount against criticism makes the criticism seem more legitimate. Machiavelli understood that rulers must be comfortable with being misunderstood. He wrote that a wise ruler cannot and should not keep his word when keeping it would work against his interests. This wasn't about lying. It was about understanding that perception management requires action, not explanation. The strategic alternative is simple but difficult. Make your decisions. Execute them completely. Let the results speak for themselves. If the results are good, no explanation is necessary. If the results are bad, no explanation will help. I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. My results speak louder than my words ever could. Principle 2. The trap of justification. Here's something that will immediately improve every difficult conversation you'll ever have. When you justify your actions, you invite a debate. And debates have winners and losers. The moment you enter a debate about your own choices, you've accepted a frame where your opponent gets to judge you. Machiavelli observed this dynamic repeatedly in political conflicts. Leaders who justified their policies created an opening for criticism. Every reason they gave could be attacked. Every explanation could be questioned. The more they said, the more vulnerable they became. But leaders who simply acted, who moved forward without justification, gave their opponents nothing to grab onto. There was no argument to counter because no argument had been made. In modern psychology, this is called entering someone else's frame. When you justify yourself, you accept the premise that you needed to justify yourself in the first place. You accept that the person questioning you has the authority to question you. You accept that their standards are the standards by which you should be measured. Watch how this plays out in everyday life. Someone criticizes your career choice. If you explain why you made that choice, you've accepted that they have standing to evaluate your career. You've given them the role of judge and taken the role of defendant. But what if you simply said nothing? Or better yet, what if you changed the subject entirely? The dynamic shifts completely. You haven't accepted their frame. You haven't granted them authority over your decisions. You've maintained your position as the captain of your own life. This is why Machiavelli wrote that a prince should never justify harsh decisions after the fact. If you have to explain why you did something difficult, you're implicitly admitting it might have been wrong. But if you simply do it and move forward with confidence, people assume you had good reasons. Let me give you a practical example. You leave a day job for a better opportunity. Your former colleagues gossip about why you really left. Some say you couldn't handle the pressure. Others say you had conflicts with management. Others invent stories out of thin air. The natural instinct is to correct the record, to explain to everyone what really happened, to make sure people have the facts. But watch what happens when you do that. First, you've given the gossip legitimacy by responding to it. If it weren't somewhat true, why would you bother addressing it? Second, you've shown that their opinions matter to you, which makes you seem less confident about your decision. Third, you've started a conversation that has no end, because for every person you explain to, there's another who heard a different version. Machiavelli's advice here is ruthlessly practical. Never respond to criticism with explanation. Respond with continued action. Your success is the only answer that matters, and if you don't succeed, no explanation will save your reputation anyway. The Otto von Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor who unified Germany through strategic brilliance, understood this perfectly. When political opponents attacked his policies in Parliament, he rarely defended them with words. Instead, he simply continued executing his strategy. When those strategies insisted, as they often did, his critics looked foolish, without him ever having to argue. Bismarck once said that politics is the art of the possible. What he meant was that results determine reality, not arguments. You don't win by explaining why you should win. You win by winning. I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. I don't debate my choices. I execute them. Re-engagement, the Cesare Borgia principle. Let me tell you about the man Machiavelli admired most, a figure so ruthlessly effective that he became the model for the prince itself. Cesare Borgia was the illegitimate son of Pope Alexander VI. He had no legitimate claim to power, no hereditary rights, no traditional path to rulership. Everything he achieved, he took for himself. Machiavelli met Borgia multiple times as a diplomat. He watched this man carve out an entire territory in central Italy through a combination of military force, strategic alliances, and psychological manipulation. And one thing struck Machiavelli above all else. Borgia never explained himself. Not once. When he conquered a territory, he didn't justify it. He simply took control. When he had to eliminate rivals, he didn't apologize. He simply eliminated them. When his methods were questioned, he simply let the results speak. Machiavelli recorded one incident that perfectly captures this principle. After conquering the Romagna region, Borgia appointed a cruel minister named Ramiro de Orco to bring order to the territory. De Orco did exactly what was asked, using harsh methods to pacify the population. But his cruelty made people hate him. When the job was done, Borgia did something that shocked everyone. He had de Orco executed and displayed his body in the public square, cut in half with a bloody knife beside it. Now here's the key insight. Borgia never explained this action. He didn't issue a statement saying he was horrified by de Orco's methods. He didn't claim he had no idea what his minister was doing. He didn't justify the execution as necessary justice. He simply did it, and then moved on. The people of Romagna were left to draw their own conclusions. Many concluded that Borgia was actually merciful, punishing the cruelty he had himself ordered. Others concluded he was ruthlessly efficient, disposing of a tool once it was no longer useful. Others concluded he was simply too powerful to question. All of these interpretations served Borgia's interests, and he achieved them without saying a word. This is the dark genius of withholding explanation. When you explain, you fix a single interpretation. When you remain silent, people project their own interpretations, and those projections often serve you better than any statement you could craft. Machiavelli wrote that Borgia's display left the people both gratified and shocked. That combination, gratification and shock, is only possible when there's ambiguity. An explanation would have eliminated the shock. Silence preserved it. Now, I'm not suggesting you need to be as ruthless as Cesare Borgia, but the principle applies at every level of life. When you remain strategically silent about your actions and motives, you become more interesting, more powerful, and more respected than when you explain everything. Mystery creates respect. Clarity invites challenge. Principle 3. Words reveal weakness. Machiavelli understood something about language that most people never grasp. Words are weapons, and every weapon can be turned against its wielder. When you explain yourself, you're not just sharing information. You're revealing the architecture of your thinking. You're showing people how you reason, what you value, and most dangerously, what you fear. Let me break this down. Every explanation contains assumptions. If you explain why you took a new job by listing the benefits, you've revealed what you consider valuable. Someone who wants to manipulate you now knows exactly what to offer. Every justification reveals concerns. If you justify a decision by addressing a specific criticism, you've shown that this criticism bothered you. Someone who wants to hurt you now knows exactly where to strike. Every defense exposes vulnerability. If you defend yourself against an accusation, you've shown that the accusation touched a nerve. Someone who wants to destabilize you now knows exactly what accusations to repeat. Machiavelli was explicit about this danger. He wrote that a prince should be a great pretender and dissembler, because the ability to conceal your true thoughts is essential to maintaining power. This doesn't mean lying, it means strategic restraint. Think about negotiation. Skilled negotiators know that the person who speaks first often loses. Why? Because speaking reveals position. The more you say about what you want and why you want it, the more leverage you give the other side. The same principle applies to explanations. When you explain yourself, you're negotiating for approval. And like any negotiation, the more cards you show, the weaker your position becomes. Consider the opposite approach. Someone questions your decision. Instead of explaining, you simply say, "I made the choice I thought was best." No details, no reasoning, no defense. What can they do with that? Nothing. There's no argument to attack. There's no reasoning to dissect. There's no vulnerability to exploit. You've given them a closed door, not an open window. This is why Machiavelli advised that princes should speak little and listen much. Listening reveals nothing. Speaking reveals everything. The more you talk, the more ammunition you provide to anyone who might later become your enemy. And make no mistake, people you think are friends today may become enemies tomorrow. Machiavelli was clear on this. Loyalty is circumstantial. Alliances shift. The person you confide in today may betray you tomorrow. Everything you've explained to them becomes a weapon in their hands. The safest approach is to maintain what I call strategic opacity. Be clear about your actions. Be vague about your reasons. Let people see what you do. Never let them fully understand why. I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. My silence is my shield. Principle 4. The cost of approval seeking. Let's talk about something that will make many of you uncomfortable. The urge to explain yourself is, at its core, an urge for approval. You want people to understand you so they'll accept you. You want them to know your reasons so they'll approve of your choices. You want them to see your perspective so they'll validate your existence. Machiavelli would call this a fatal weakness. He observed that leaders who sought the approval of their subjects eventually lost control of their states. Why? Because the moment you seek approval, you grant others authority over you. You've made their opinion the standard by which you measure yourself. You've handed them the power to validate or invalidate your choices. This is psychological suicide disguised as healthy communication. The truth that nobody wants to hear is this: most people's opinions of you don't matter. They don't know your circumstances. They don't understand your constraints. They don't share your values. They're not living your life. And yet, when you explain yourself to them, you're implicitly accepting that their opinion should influence your decisions. You're treating them as advisors when they're actually just spectators. Machiavelli put it bluntly. He wrote that a ruler who wants to hold on to his position has to know how not to be good, and when to use this ability and when not. This line is often misinterpreted as advice to be immoral. It's not. It's advice to be independent. A ruler cannot let public opinion determine every decision. If he does, he's not really ruling. He's being ruled by the crowd. The same applies to your life. If you let other people's potential disapproval determine your choices, you're not really living your life. You're living a life designed to satisfy an audience that will never actually be satisfied. Think about the most approval-seeking person you know. The one who constantly explains their choices, asks for input before every decision, and gets anxious when anyone seems to disapprove. How much respect do you have for that person? Be honest. Not much, right? And here's the cruel irony. The more they seek approval, the less they receive. The more they explain, the less people trust their judgment. The more they justify, the more people question their decisions. Now think about someone who operates with complete self-assurance. Someone who makes decisions, acts on them, and doesn't look back for validation. Someone who seems genuinely indifferent to whether others approve. How much respect do you have for that person? The difference is everything. The first person repels respect by chasing it. The second person attracts respect by ignoring it. Machiavelli saw this pattern in every court he visited. The nobles who constantly sought the king's approval were treated as servile. The nobles who maintained their dignity and independence were treated as equals. The same principle operates today. Explanation is a form of supplication. Silence is a form of sovereignty. I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. I don't seek approval, I give it. The Marcus Aurelius contrast. Now, some of you might be thinking that this is all very Machiavellian, very calculating, very cold. So let me bring in a different voice for perspective. Marcus Aurelius was a Roman emperor and one of the greatest Stoic philosophers. He ruled at the height of Rome's power, facing wars, plagues, and endless political intrigue. His private meditations, never meant for publication, reveal a mind constantly wrestling with how to be good in a position of ultimate power. And here's what's fascinating. Marcus Aurelius came to nearly the same conclusion as Machiavelli, but from completely different reasoning. He wrote, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than others, but care more about their opinions than our own." Marcus wasn't thinking about power dynamics or strategic positioning. He was thinking about inner peace and rational living. And yet, he arrived at the same place. The obsession with others' opinions is a disease of the mind. It makes us act against our own judgment. It makes us explain ourselves to people who have no business judging us. He also wrote, "Don't be disturbed. Don't be anxious about what people say about you. It's not in your control." This is the Stoic version of Machiavelli's advice. Machiavelli said, "Don't explain, because it weakens your position." Marcus said, "Don't explain, because it disturbs your peace." Different reasons, same conclusion. The synthesis is powerful. From a strategic perspective, explanations weaken you. From a philosophical perspective, the need to explain reveals inner weakness. From both perspectives, the path forward is the same. Act according to your judgment, and let the results speak. The man who explained himself to no one was respected in Rome as a philosopher king. The man who explained himself to everyone would have been despised as a weak ruler seeking approval from his subjects. 2,000 years later, nothing has changed. Human nature remains constant. The psychology that makes explanations ineffective operated in ancient Rome just as it operates in your office, your relationships, and your social circles today. This isn't cynical manipulation. This is realistic understanding of how humans actually respond to confidence and uncertainty. You can use this understanding for good ends or bad ends, but you cannot ignore it without paying the price. Principle 5. Actions speak, words whisper. Machiavelli's most famous insight is usually summarized as, "The end justifies the means." But this is a shallow reading. What he actually argued was more subtle and more powerful. He argued that people judge you by results, not by intentions. They judge you by what you achieve, not by what you explain. They judge you by outcomes, not by processes. And crucially, they don't judge fairly. They judge with bias, self-interest, and limited information. Your explanations enter a mind already disposed for or against you. They're filtered through preconceptions you cannot control. But results? Results are harder to dismiss. When you succeed, people construct stories to explain your success. They attribute wisdom, skill, and good judgment to you, whether you possess these qualities or not. When you fail, they attribute foolishness, incompetence, and bad judgment, regardless of how reasonable your decisions were. This is why explanation is futile. People don't update their beliefs based on your explanations. They update their beliefs based on your outcomes, then retroactively fit your explanations into their updated worldview. If you succeed, your explanation becomes evidence of your wisdom. See, he knew exactly what he was doing. If you fail, your same explanation becomes evidence of your foolishness. He actually thought that would work? How naive. The explanation doesn't change the interpretation. The outcome does. So why waste energy explaining? That energy is better spent on execution. Every minute you spend justifying your past choices is a minute not spent making your current choices successful. Machiavelli observed that the most successful rulers maintained their reputations for virtues they didn't necessarily possess and avoided the reputation for vices they practiced freely. How did they do this? Not through explanation, through management of outcomes. If a ruler needed to be cruel to secure his state, he was cruel quickly and efficiently, then moved on to be seen doing generous things. The cruelty became a distant memory. The generosity remained present in people's minds. No explanation was given for the cruelty. No justification was offered. Instead, the ruler flooded subsequent perception with positive actions that reframed the narrative. This is the sophisticated alternative to explanation. Don't tell people who you are. Show them. Don't justify your past. Shape their present experience of you. Don't explain your decisions. Make new decisions that create the perception you want. In practical terms, this means stop spending energy on reputation defense. Start spending energy on reputation construction. Every explanation is defensive. Every positive action is constructive. I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. I build my reputation through action, not explanation. Principle 6. The power of strategic ambiguity. The final principle brings everything together, and it might be the most valuable. When you don't explain yourself, you create ambiguity. And ambiguity, properly managed, is one of the most powerful tools available to you. Machiavelli wrote extensively about the value of being difficult to understand. He noted that rulers who were easily read were easily manipulated. Rulers whose thoughts remained opaque kept their enemies guessing and their allies attentive. Why is ambiguity so powerful? First, it forces others to invest energy in understanding you. When your motives are clear, people can dismiss you with a quick categorization. Oh, he's just ambitious. Oh, she just wants approval. But when your motives are unclear, people have to think. They have to watch. They have to give you their attention. Second, ambiguity allows multiple interpretations, and you can benefit from all of them. When Cesare Borgia executed his minister without explanation, some people thought he was merciful, some thought he was ruthless, some thought he was brilliant. All of these interpretations enhanced his power. If Borgia had explained, he would have fixed a single interpretation. He would have traded all that complexity for one simple story. And simple stories are easily challenged. Third, ambiguity protects you from future shifts. When circumstances change, your explained positions become anchors that drag you down. But unexplained actions can be reinterpreted as conditions evolve. A leader who explained a decision one way cannot easily explain it differently when the situation changes. A leader who never explained can simply act differently without contradiction. Bismarck understood this principle perhaps better than any modern statesman. His diplomatic strategy was famous for its complexity and opacity. Even his allies often weren't sure what he was really planning. This uncertainty kept everyone attentive and respectful. When asked about his intentions, Bismarck would often give vague or even contradictory answers. He once said that he had many irons in the fire and never liked to explain which one he was actually heating. The result? His enemies couldn't coordinate against him because they couldn't predict his next move. His allies remained engaged because they needed to stay close to understand his strategy. His reputation for strategic genius grew precisely because no one could fully grasp his reasoning. Now, want to be clear. This isn't about lying. This isn't about deceiving people. This is about understanding that not everything needs to be shared. Your inner thoughts, your true motivations, your strategic reasoning, these are yours. You get to decide who deserves access to them. Most people give this access away freely, to anyone who asks. They explain themselves to strangers, justify themselves to critics, and defend themselves to enemies. The Machiavellian approach is different. Guard your inner world. Share your actions openly. Let people observe what you do. Never fully reveal why you do it. This creates an aura of depth. People sense there is more to you than they can see. This depth commands respect in a way that full transparency never can. The person who is fully understood is the person who is fully dismissed. I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. My depth is my power. My silence is my strength. Let's bring this together. Machiavelli's warning against explaining yourself isn't about communication skills or relationship tactics. It's about power. It's about understanding the fundamental dynamics that govern how humans perceive, judge, and respond to each other. When you explain yourself, you confess doubt in your own decisions. Enter a debate where others become your judges. Reveal the architecture of your thinking to potential enemies. Seems approval that can only be given by those you've made superior. Waste energy on defense that should go toward construction. Eliminate the strategic value of ambiguity. When you refuse to explain yourself, you project confidence in your own judgment. Maintain your position without accepting someone else's frame. Preserve your strategic advantage by revealing nothing. Assert that you need no one's approval but your own. Focus your energy on actions that create results. Benefit from multiple interpretations of your behavior. The choice is yours, but know that the path you've been taught, the path of constant explanation, constant justification, constant defense, is the path of weakness. It feels safe because it feels communicative, but communication and explanation are not the same thing. You can communicate clearly while explaining nothing. You can be understood without being fully revealed. You can connect with people without giving them the keys to manipulate you. Machiavelli was a man who understood power because he lost it. He spent his final years watching from the outside, writing down truths that most people will never accept. He wrote that the rulers he most admired were those who never needed to explain themselves because their actions were their arguments. Your actions are your arguments. Your results are your defense. Your continued movement forward is your only explanation. The next time someone demands that you justify yourself, remember this video. Remember Machiavelli sitting in his study, dressed in palace robes, writing truths that would echo for 5 centuries. And then say nothing, do nothing, give them nothing. Let the silence stretch. Let them fill it with their own anxiety. Let them wonder what you're thinking, what you're planning, what you'll do next. Because the person who explains is the person who submits, and you are done submitting. If this resonated with you, understand that this is just the beginning. Every video on this channel is designed to strip away the comfortable lies you've been told and replace them with uncomfortable truths that actually work. Subscribe. Hit the notification bell, because the knowledge that gives you power is the knowledge the world doesn't want you to have. The next time you're tempted to explain yourself, ask this simple question: who benefits from my explanation? If the answer is anyone but you, stay silent. Your silence is not weakness. Your silence is war.